Commander Vex Kronos of the Galactic Supremacy Council adjusted his ceremonial battle cloak and sneered at the primitive blue marble spinning lazily on his tactical display. Earth, the cosmic punchline, the galaxy's favorite comedy show. Behold, he announced to his bridge crew with the kind of dramatic flair that only came from 3 centuries of unchallenged superiority, the most amusing species in the known universe. Humans. They fight wars over imaginary lines on dirt, worship invisible beings in the sky, and somehow manage to split the atom before figuring out how to stop killing each other over resources that are literally infinite in space. His communications officer, Lieutenant Zix, barely suppressed a chuckle. "Sir, should we establish first contact protocols?" "Oh, absolutely," Kronos replied, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "Let's give them the standard greeting. The one where we explain how we're here to protect them from the big scary universe while they provide us with entertainment. Like cosmic babysitters, but the babies are hilarious." The transmission went out across space, carried by technology that humans wouldn't understand for another 1,000 years. Standard galactic common, auto-translated into their primitive languages. The message was simple: greetings, adorable Earth creatures. We are the Galactic Supremacy Council, and we've been watching your quaint little civilization with great amusement. Don't worry about the big scary universe out here. We'll protect you. All we ask in return is that you keep doing whatever it is you're doing, because frankly you're better than our best comedy programs. Kronos expected the usual response from newly discovered species. Awe, fear, perhaps some primitive worship. Maybe a few of them would faint. It was always entertaining when they fainted. What he got instead was a transmission from something called Captain Jake Morrison at what appeared to be a military installation. The human's response crackled through the ship's speakers with static that suggested their technology was held together with hopes and prayers. "Well, hey there, space buddies," came the voice, dripping with an attitude that Kronos couldn't quite identify but found oddly unsettling. "Thanks for the offer, but we're doing just fine down here. Though I gotta say, calling us adorable is a bit rich coming from a species that looks like someone crossed a lobster with a really pretentious drama teacher. But hey, if you want to stick around and watch the show, grab some popcorn. Fair warning though, it gets pretty intense." Kronos blinked all 4 of his eyes in sequence. That was not how first contact was supposed to go. Species were supposed to be grateful for their protection. They were supposed to understand their place in the cosmic hierarchy. They were not supposed to make jokes about his appearance. "Did he just," Lieutenant Zix began, his voice uncertain, "did he just insult your appearance, sir?" "I think," Kronos replied slowly, his claws extending slightly, "I think he did." "Well then, it appears these humans need a more detailed explanation of how the galaxy works, and their place in it." He opened a channel to the Galactic Council's Anthropology Division. "Professor Flux, I need a complete behavioral analysis of this species. Something's not adding up. According to our scouts, they should be cowering in caves by now." Professor Flux's response came through tinged with academic excitement. "Oh, Commander, you're in for a treat. Humans are absolutely fascinating. They're the only species we've encountered that uses the phrase 'hold my beer' as both a challenge and a battle cry. Our xenobiologists are having a field day trying to figure out how they survive their own evolution." "Survive their own evolution?" "Well, yes. Most species develop logic and survival instincts that prevent them from, say, strapping explosives to their backs and jumping out of flying vehicles for fun. Humans call this extreme sports. They also invented something called reality television, which appears to be a form of psychological warfare they practice on themselves, for entertainment." Kronos felt a small twinge of something that might have been concern, but he pushed it down. They were humans. Primitive, illogical, barely evolved primates who hadn't even figured out faster than light travel yet. How dangerous could they possibly be? "Set course for Earth," he commanded. "I think it's time we paid our new friends a visit and explained the facts of galactic life to them, and in person." As his ship's engines hummed to life, propelling them toward the small blue planet, Kronos couldn't shake the feeling that Captain Morrison's laughter was still echoing through his communications array. But that was impossible. The transmission had ended minutes ago. Hadn't it? 3 standard galactic days later, Kronos stood on the surface of Earth, specifically in what the humans called Nevada, staring at a collection of buildings that looked like they'd been assembled by someone who'd read a manual on architecture while heavily intoxicated. "Welcome to Area 51, announced Captain Morrison, appearing beside him with the kind of casual confidence that suggested he owned the place. Which, according to the briefings, he basically did. Don't mind the name. It's ironic. We've got about 53 areas just like this one, but who's counting? Kronos adjusted his environmental suit and tried to maintain his dignity. The gravity on this planet was uncomfortable, the atmosphere was full of pollutants, and everything smelled like something had died and been seasoned with industrial chemicals. Captain Morrison, I believe there may have been some miscommunication in our previous exchange. Allow me to clarify the situation. Oh, we're crystal clear, Morrison interrupted, gesturing toward a human female who appeared to be preparing some sort of demonstration. Commander Kronos, meet Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, our cultural liaison. Maya, show our new friends what humans do for fun. Lieutenant Rodriguez grinned with the kind of enthusiasm that set off every warning instinct Kronos had developed in 3 centuries of military service. She was standing next to what appeared to be a primitive flying machine with no enclosed cockpit and fabric wings that looked like they'd been stolen from a large insect. So this is a hang glider, she announced cheerfully, strapping the contraption to her back. Basically, we jump off cliffs with these things and hope the wind catches us right. If it doesn't, well, that's what emergency parachutes are for. And if those don't work, that's what the emergency backup parachutes are for. And if those don't work, that's what really good health insurance is for. She sprinted toward the edge of a nearby cliff and launched herself into the void with a whoop of pure joy. Kronos watched in horror as the human plummeted toward the desert floor, apparently held aloft only by physics and optimism. "She's going to die," he whispered. "Nah, Maya's got like a 97% success rate with those things," Morrison replied casually. "Much better than when she was learning. You should have seen her first attempts. We went through so much medical gauze that quarter." "You let your people practice potentially lethal activities for recreation?" "Let them? Commander, we encourage it. How else are you supposed to know what you're capable of if you don't push the limits? Besides, Maya's our extreme sports specialist. Wait until you meet our competitive eating champion." As if summoned by the mention of food, a massive human approached carrying what appeared to be enough nutrition to feed Kronos' entire crew for a week. The human began consuming it at a rate that defied biological possibility. "That's Sergeant Tommy Tank Patterson," Morrison explained. "He holds the base record for consuming 73 hot dogs in 10 minutes. Hot dogs are cylinder-shaped processed meat products that we coat in various chemical compounds and serve on bread. For fun." Professor Edmund Quillsworth, the human academic they'd requested to explain their species' psychology, approached with arms full of primitive data storage devices. "Ah, Commander, you're just in time for the cultural presentation. I've prepared a comprehensive overview of human recreational activities. Here we have footage of something called cage fighting, where humans voluntarily enter enclosed spaces and attempt to subdue each other using only their natural physical capabilities." The images that followed made Kronos question everything he thought he knew about primitive species. Humans throwing themselves out of aircraft, humans racing vehicles at speeds that would be fatal in the event of mechanical failure, humans climbing vertical rock faces using only their appendages, humans voluntarily entering environments that their physiology was never designed to survive. Professor Kronos asked carefully, "Are these training exercises for your military?" "Oh heavens no," Quillsworth replied with academic cheerfulness. "These are what we do on weekends. For relaxation. Our military training is much more intense. Would you like to see?" "No," Kronos said quickly. "No, that won't be necessary. I think I'm beginning to understand." But he wasn't. Not at all. Because everything he was seeing suggested that humans treated mortal peril as a form of entertainment. Which meant either they were too stupid to understand danger, or they were so confident in their abilities that they found danger amusing. Looking at Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had just landed her flying contraption perfectly and was already preparing for another launch, the Kronos was beginning to suspect it was the latter. And that thought was far more terrifying than he was willing to admit. Kronos retreated to his command ship orbiting Earth, his confidence shaken but his pride intact. Pride, as it turned out, was about to become a serious problem. Lieutenant Zix, he announced to his bridge crew, draft a formal challenge to the human leadership. It's clear they don't understand their position in the galactic hierarchy. A demonstration is required. Sir, are you certain? The initial report suggests these humans might be more unpredictable than initially assessed. Unpredictable, yes. Dangerous, hardly. They're still using chemical propulsion to barely escape their own gravity well. We're operating with technology that manipulates space-time itself. A few simple tests will establish the proper order of things. Back on Earth, Captain Morrison received the formal challenge with the kind of grin that should have been classified as a weapon. He immediately called a meeting with his senior staff, which consisted of Lieutenant Rodriguez, Professor Quillsworth, and the one person who actually understood what was happening, Sergeant Betty Williams. Sergeant Williams was the kind of military strategist who could plan an invasion of hell and come back with souvenirs. She'd been quietly studying the galactic situation while everyone else was having fun with the aliens, and she had some very interesting observations. Sir, she said, reviewing the alien challenge on her tablet, they want to conduct 3 tests: physical capability, intellectual capacity, and technological advancement. They expect to win all 3. And are they going to win? Morrison asked. Williams looked at him with the expression of someone who'd just been asked if water was wet. Captain, they've based their entire assessment of our species on observation data that's apparently several decades old. They think we're still in the early atomic age. They think our most advanced weapons are chemical explosives. They think our idea of advanced technology is internal combustion engines. Meaning? Meaning they have no idea what they're asking for. Professor Quillsworth adjusted his glasses nervously. Perhaps we should inform them of their miscalculation? It seems unsporting to accept a challenge under false pretenses. Morrison's grin widened. Professor, did they ask us to be sporting when they showed up here calling us adorable cosmic pets? Did they seem interested in fair play when they offered to protect us from the big scary universe? Well, no, but... Then they get what they asked for. Sergeant Williams, what's our play? Williams consulted her tablet, which contained detailed analysis of galactic military technology based on passive scans of the alien ship. We give them exactly what they expect, Captain, right up until we don't. Lieutenant Rodriguez bounced excitedly. Are we going to show them the new exoskeleton prototypes? Please tell me we're going to show them the exoskeleton prototypes. Among other things, Williams replied. But first, we let them win a few rounds. Keep them confident. Let them think they understand what they're dealing with. Morrison nodded approvingly. I like it. How long do we string them along? Long enough for them to get cocky. Long enough for them to start bragging to their friends back home. Long enough for this to become a matter of galactic pride instead of just first contact diplomacy. And then? Wow. Williams smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had once made enemy generals surrender without firing a shot. And then we remind them why humans are the only species that invented the concept of overkill and decided it wasn't quite enough. The formal acceptance of the challenge went out to the alien ship within the hour. Captain Morrison's response was polite, diplomatic, and absolutely dripping with false humility. We are honored by your challenge, Commander Kronos. While we know we cannot possibly match the superiority of galactic civilization, we humbly accept your tests and promise to do our best. Reading the response on his bridge, Kronos felt his confidence returning. There we go. Proper respect at last. Lieutenant Zix, prepare the testing grounds. This should be over quickly. On Earth, Professor Quillsworth was having second thoughts. Captain, are we certain this is wise? What if we accidentally start an interstellar war? Morrison looked at him with genuine confusion. Professor, who said anything about starting a war? We're just going to show them exactly who they're dealing with. If that leads to a war, well, that's their choice. Sergeant Williams checked her equipment one final time. Besides, Professor, wars are what humans are really good at. It's like Maya's hang gliding, but with more explosions and better planning. The stage was set. The aliens expected easy victory. The humans were prepared to deliver exactly what they deserved. This was going to be educational. The first test was physical capability, and Kronos felt confident as his champion, Sub-Commander Thexan, stepped into the testing area. Thexan was a prime specimen of Kronlian physiology, 8 feet tall, 4 arms, natural armor plating, and reflexes that could track projectiles moving at supersonic speeds. His opponent was Sergeant Tommy Patterson, the human who apparently spent his free time consuming dangerous quantities of processed meat products. This will be brief, Kronos announced to the assembled crowd of humans and aliens. A simple contest of strength, speed, and endurance. The strength test went exactly as expected. Thexan lifted weights that would have crushed Patterson instantly. The speed test was similarly one-sided, with the alien moving so fast he appeared to blur. But then came the endurance test, and that's where things got interesting. The test will continue until one participant can no longer function, announced Professor Quillsworth, who was serving as neutral referee. Again. 6 hours later, Sub-Commander Thexan was gasping for breath, his natural armor plating slick with perspiration, while Sergeant Patterson was still jogging steadily around the track, occasionally calling out encouraging words to his alien opponent. How is this possible? Kronos demanded. Your physiology is clearly inferior. Well, Mel, Morrison replied casually. Tommy here runs ultramarathons for fun. You know, races that are longer than the distance your people consider physically possible. He once ran across our entire continent just to see if he could. Took him about 4 months, but he stopped to sightsee along the way. The second test was intellectual capacity, and Kronos was certain this would restore proper order. Professor Quillsworth faced off against the alien's top scientist in a series of logic puzzles and mathematical challenges. The alien won the first dozen rounds handily, solving complex equations that should have taken humans years to understand. Then Quillsworth was presented with a problem that had stumped galactic scientists for centuries. How to efficiently distribute resources across multiple star systems with varying environmental conditions and unpredictable demand fluctuations. Oh, that's easy, Quillsworth said, scribbling notes on a primitive paper tablet. You apply modified chaos theory with adaptive algorithmic distribution weighted by historical consumption patterns adjusted for seasonal variance and predictable emergency scenarios. Like planning a university cafeteria menu, but bigger. He solved it in 47 minutes. Impossible, breathed the alien scientist. That problem requires computational resources we don't possess. No, it requires thinking differently about the problem, Quillsworth replied cheerfully. You've been approaching it as a mathematical puzzle when it's actually a human psychology problem. You just have to account for the fact that people will always need more than they think they need, want different things than what they actually need, and will absolutely hoard resources if they think there's going to be a shortage. The third test was technological advancement, and this is where Lieutenant Rodriguez really got to shine. The aliens presented their latest innovation, a personal energy shield that could deflect projectiles and energy weapons while remaining lightweight and efficient. It had taken their best scientists 3 decades to develop. Rodriguez responded by pulling a roll of duct tape and a handheld device from her equipment pack. This is a standard issue tactical tablet, she explained, slapping it onto the alien shield generator with several strips of tape. And this is military-grade duct tape, which we use to fix literally everything. Together they create what we call a jury-rigged enhancement matrix. She powered on the tablet, which immediately began running what appeared to be a video game. And somehow the alien shield not only worked better but began displaying holographic advertisements for human consumer products. How does that even function? Demanded the alien technician. No idea, Rodriguez replied happily. But it works, It's cheap, and if it breaks, we can fix it by hitting it with a hammer. We call it percussive maintenance. Sometimes we hit things to make them work better. Kronos stared at the impossible hybrid technology, watching his sophisticated energy shield displaying a commercial for something called cheeseburgers while operating at 300% efficiency. This violates 17 principles of advanced physics, he whispered. Yeah, we do that a lot, Morrison agreed. Physics is more of a guideline than a rule, really. Like speed limits or expiration dates. By the end of the day, Kronos was beginning to realize that everything he thought he knew about humans might have been slightly, catastrophically wrong. But the real revelation was still coming. The final test was combat simulation, and Kronos was absolutely certain this would restore the natural order of the universe. Combat was what his species was designed for. 3 centuries of galactic peacekeeping had honed their military capabilities to perfection. A simple scenario, he announced. Small unit tactics in hostile territory. My team will demonstrate proper military procedure. Morrison nodded agreeably. Sounds reasonable. Maya, you want to handle this one? Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward, no longer the cheerful extreme sports enthusiast from the previous days. Something had changed in her demeanor, and Kronos felt a chill run down his spine as he realized he was looking at someone else entirely. Lieutenant Rodriguez, 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, she announced crisply. Specialized in urban warfare, tactical demolitions, and what we call making problems go away. The simulation began in what appeared to be a standard urban environment. Kronos' elite tactical team moved with perfect precision, advancing by the book, clearing corners with textbook efficiency. They were a symphony of military perfection. Rodriguez simply vanished. Where did she go? Kronos demanded, scanning the simulation readouts. She's around, Morrison replied casually. Maya's got what we call situational adaptability. It's a human trait. One by one, Kronos' perfect soldiers began disappearing from the simulation. Not killed, just gone. Confused. Turned around. Somehow convinced they were supposed to be somewhere else entirely. This is impossible, Kronos muttered. My soldiers are trained to handle any tactical scenario. Any scenario you can imagine, corrected Sergeant Williams, speaking up for the first time. But humans don't fight the way you expect fighting to work. The simulation ended with Rodriguez appearing behind Kronos' command position, having somehow infiltrated what should have been an impregnable defensive position. How? Kronos asked simply. I used the maintenance tunnels, she replied. Every urban environment has infrastructure. Sewers, utility lines, service corridors. Your people plan for enemy soldiers. We plan for enemy soldiers who might also be plumbers. Morrison stepped forward, and suddenly his casual demeanor dropped away like a discarded mask. Commander, I think it's time we had an honest conversation. Sergeant Williams, why don't you bring our guest up to speed? Williams activated a holographic display that made the alien technology look like stone tools. Commander Kronos, meet the Global Defense Initiative. We've been monitoring galactic communications for about 60 years now. Every signal you've ever sent, every military frequency, every diplomatic channel. We've been listening. The display showed detailed technical specifications for every ship in the galactic fleet, complete tactical assessments of every known alien military force, and comprehensive psychological profiles of every species in the Galactic Council. Your entertainment broadcasts were particularly informative, Williams continued, especially the ones you thought were encrypted. We know about your political structures, your resource limitations, your military capabilities, and your plans for managing primitive species. Kronos felt something that might have been panic. That's impossible. Our encryption is quantum-level advanced. Yeah, we cracked that about 30 years ago, Morrison said. Turns out quantum encryption has some interesting vulnerabilities if you approach the problem from directions your physicists never considered. Human directions. Professor Quillsworth cleared his throat. Commander, the rather uncomfortable truth is that while your species was developing advanced technology, we were developing advanced ways of thinking about problems, You've created tools that work within the parameters of how you understand the universe. We've created solutions that work regardless of whether we understand the universe or not. The holographic display shifted to show Earth's actual military capabilities. Not the primitive chemical rockets and atomic weapons the aliens had observed, but fusion-powered spacecraft, directed energy weapons, and defensive systems that made the Galactic Fleet look like toys. We've been ready for you for decades, Williams explained. Every scenario, every possible first contact situation, every potential threat profile. You want to know the really funny part? You're actually the 16th alien species to make contact. The other 15 were a lot more polite about it. Morrison grinned, and this time it wasn't friendly at all. Commander, you've been thinking about this all wrong. You keep talking about how humans are primitive and need protection from the big scary universe. But here's the thing. We are the big scary thing in the universe. We're the species that other species tell stories about to frighten their children. Kronos looked around at the humans surrounding him, really seeing them for the first time. The casual competence. The easy confidence. The way they treated impossible problems as minor inconveniences. What do you want? He asked quietly. Want? Nothing much, Morrison replied. Just for you to go back to your Galactic Council and explain that the humans would like to discuss joining as equals, not pets. And if that's not acceptable, well, we've got some alternative suggestions they might find interesting. The terrible truth settled over Kronos like a heavy blanket. Humanity hadn't been discovered by the galaxy. The galaxy had been discovered by humanity. And they'd been waiting patiently to see what their new neighbors were going to do about it. My gods, he whispered. You're all completely insane. Thank you, Rodriguez replied cheerfully, back to her extreme sports persona. We prefer creatively problem-solving, but insane works too. 6 Galactic Standard months later, Commander Kronos found himself in the unusual position of requesting backup from the species he'd once considered cosmic comic relief. Human Military Advisory Team Alpha 7, this is Kronos requesting immediate tactical support. We have a situation in the Vega sector that's beyond our capabilities. The response came through clearly, transmitted on communication equipment that somehow worked better than anything in the Galactic Fleet despite being held together with duct tape and what humans called aggressive optimism. Copy that, Commander. Captain Morrison here. What's the problem this time? Rebel faction with advanced weaponry has taken control of 3 star systems. Our conventional tactics have proven ineffective. They've adapted to our standard military procedures. Adapted to your procedures? Well, that's their first mistake. Maya, you want to handle this one? Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm. Already on it, Captain. I'm reading their tactical patterns now. Classic fortress mentality with layered defensive positions. Very logical. Very predictable. Very boring. What's your assessment, Lieutenant? Give me 4 humans, a case of energy drinks, and whatever the local equivalent of duct tape is, and I'll have this wrapped up by Thursday. Maybe Wednesday if they're really as logical as they seem. Kronos had learned not to question human tactical assessments. In the past 6 months, human advisory teams had resolved 17 impossible military situations, ended 3 civil wars that had been raging for decades, and somehow convinced 2 species to stop fighting each other by introducing them to something called competitive baking. The Galactic Council's official records now listed humans as strategic consultation specialists and problem resolution experts, but Kronos knew the truth. They were the species you called when conventional thinking wasn't working. When logic had failed. When you needed someone to look at an impossible situation and say, "Hold my beer." Human tactics are spreading throughout the galaxy, reported his aide, Lieutenant Zix. The Andorian fleet has adopted their percussive maintenance protocols. The Centauri Diplomatic Corps is using something called constructive sarcasm in trade negotiations. Even the Volcari military has started training exercises based on human extreme sports. Kronos nodded. It was inevitable, really. Once you'd seen humans solve a resource shortage by jury-rigging a solution that violated several laws of physics, traditional approaches started looking unnecessarily complicated. Sir? Zix continued. I've been analyzing the cultural impact reports. Should we be concerned about the rate of human integration into galactic society? Concerned? Kronos laughed, a sound that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Lieutenant, concern is what you feel when facing a known threat. What we're experiencing is the gradual realization that the universe is far more interesting than we previously understood. The Vega situation resolved itself in 2 days. Lieutenant Rodriguez's team didn't defeat the rebels through superior firepower or advanced tactics. They convinced the rebel leadership to surrender by demonstrating human recreational activities, specifically something called parkour, which apparently involved treating urban architecture as an obstacle course designed for entertainment. The rebels were so impressed by the concept of making infrastructure fun that they agreed to peaceful negotiations in exchange for training programs. How do you even explain that in a military report? Kronos asked Morrison during the post-operation debrief. You don't, Morrison replied. You file it under alternative conflict resolution and move on to the next problem. Speaking of which, we've got a situation in the Orion sector that might interest you. Kronos had learned that when humans said something might interest him, it usually meant the universe was about to become significantly more complicated. What kind of situation? Well, apparently there's a species out there that thinks they're the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. They've been conquering star systems using what they call pure logical warfare and superior tactical thinking. They want to challenge Earth to prove their dominance. Kronos felt something that might have been sympathy for the unknown species. Have you accepted their challenge? Oh, absolutely, Morrison grinned. Professor Quillsworth is preparing a cultural exchange program. Something about introducing them to the concept of fun as a tactical advantage. Maya's working on a demonstration involving bungee jumping and competitive eating. And Sergeant Williams? She's preparing what she calls the educational experience. I think she's planning to let them win a few rounds first, just to keep things interesting. Kronos shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, he'd thought humans were the galaxy's comic relief. Now he realized they were the galaxy's problem-solving department. The universe's technical support team. The species you called when everything else had failed and you needed someone crazy enough to try something that might just work. Commander Morrison said as they prepared to depart, I hope you're not too upset about how this all turned out. I know it's not what you were expecting when you first made contact. Kronos considered the question seriously. His species had gone from galactic peacekeepers to junior partners in what was essentially a universe-wide consulting firm run by beings who treated physics as a suggestion and danger as entertainment. Captain, he said finally, upset is not the correct term. Educated, perhaps. Enlightened, definitely. And grateful that you're on our side. Who said anything about sides? Morrison replied with that terrifying human grin. We're all in this together now. One big, happy, slightly insane galactic family. And somehow Kronos thought as he watched the human ship disappear into hyperspace trailing duct tape and determination, that was exactly what the universe needed. After all, the universe was a big, complicated, dangerous place. It only made sense that the best way to deal with it was to send in the species that looked at big, complicated, dangerous situations and said, challenge accepted.